everyone. My name's Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to have all of you joining us in person and on the live stream for a pop-up conversation with Senator John Thune, the Republican from South Dakota. He's also the Senate Minority Whip and also serves as ranking member of the Telecom Subcommittee in the Senate, which is great because we're going to be talking news of the day as well as 5G and Spectrum. A big thank you to Verizon for making this conversation possible. This morning, after our conversation with Senator Thune, I'm going to be joined by Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg, as well as Tom Brady, seven-time world champion, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, to talk for a fireside chat. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media channels at Punchbowl News. We encourage you to share about this conversation. And with that, I'm going to welcome the senator to the stage. Hello.
Great to see you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Here or here?
Here, we'll go right in the middle.
All right, very good. Okay.
Right in the hot seat, you know? All right, so as you know, we've done these before. We always start with a little news of the day before we get to the topic.
Right.
Tomorrow, the Senate is going to vote on the bipartisan border security bill. Democrats clearly trying to make this an issue going into the 2024 election. Do you think this is going to be a problem for Republicans since you had the deal and then former President Donald Trump basically said, you know, don't move this forward?
I don't. I think this issue is really baked in for people across the country. We've had 3.5 years now of this administration's policies, which, by the way, when President Biden took office, almost his first day in office, he reversed 94 executive orders, actions taken by the previous administration dealing with the border. And that's what's led us to this. And I think people know that. What the Democrats are going to do tomorrow is clearly nothing more, in my view, than political theater. I mean, they're trying, they understand this is political vulnerability for them. They want to get right on it. And I think they're trying to give some of their incumbents in particular some political cover on an issue that's incredibly important as an electoral issue going into the fall campaigns, and in one in which I think they are clearly on defense. So in my view, that's what it is, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. And I think that's the way most of our members are treating it.
We were talking backstage about how things in Washington slow down quite a bit as we get into sometimes some people say silly season, some people say, you know, the politics before an election. We are 6 months out from the Senate GOP leadership elections. You're obviously running to succeed Mitch McConnell in that role. Talk to us a little bit about your plans this summer and beyond as you look to lock up the requisite votes, not only among your current colleagues, but I know you're also going to be on the road helping out some of those that are challenging Democrats.
Well, I mean, what's unusual about this leadership election is it started like 7 months before it usually does. You know, usually these issues are decided after the general election in November. But so we've got a big lead time, a big runway. And so you have an opportunity to meet with your colleagues. It is the quintessential inside Washington issue. It's a secret ballot election. And so you just have to make the best case that you can, make the argument to your colleagues. And obviously, we're going to be very active over the course of the next several months, getting around the country, not only helping incumbents who are running for re-election, but also a lot of our challenger candidates out there. And as you know, we've got a great map and a great slate of candidates. But I always tell people that leadership elections, because they are secret ballots, when I first got to the Senate, there was an election for the job I now have, the whip job, between Lamar Alexander from Tennessee and Trent Lott from Mississippi. And I think Lamar, thought he had it won. And Lott eked out a victory there, and Lamar's great line, it was something to the effect that I wrote 27 thank you notes for 23 votes. And I think that kind of summarizes the secret ballot elections for leadership. So,
given our conversation later, we always at Punchbowl News say the leadership elections are our Super Bowl
right,
election.
Yes, yeah.
So we are covering it very, very closely.
Yes, you are.
You and you and former President Donald Trump have had a history of testy exchanges over the years. Talk a little bit about, can you work with him? Do you think, and we think about kind of what we cover, do you think he'll try to force you all to get rid of the filibuster?
I don't know what he does on that. You know, obviously in his last term as president, that was something that he pushed on quite hard at times to try and get the Senate to eliminate the filibuster. But our members are committed to preserving it. It is so essential. It's the essence of the Senate. It's what the founders had in mind. And frankly, if you change the filibuster, you not only change the Senate, you change the country. And so inasmuch as we want to work with if President Trump is the next president, I think he's got a very good chance of being the next president, work with him on an agenda that's good for the American people. But we're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way and put together, cobble together the types of majorities that enable us to get to the 60-vote threshold on most consequential legislation. Obviously, if we have a trifecta, House, Senate, and White House, we can do some things through budget reconciliation at 51 votes. But clearly, the majority of the Senate agenda is going to be done at 60.
So patience, because that's what the filibuster requires, and reconciliation, frankly.
Well, it does, and it's there for a reason. And of course, we don't like it when we want to do things quickly, and the Democrats clearly have already demonstrated a desire to eliminate it. And I think we need to be committed to preserving it because of what it means, not only to the Senate but to the country.
All right, let's shift gears to the focus of the conversation, 5G and spectrum. The FCC spectrum authorization was extended until March 2023. We're obviously in 2024. It's been more than a year since the FCC could conduct any auctions. Why is this stalled?
No, I think, unfortunately, there are many cases disputes about when you have auctions, spectrum auctions, it's about how do you spend the proceeds. So that's one issue. The other issue is sharing it, how it gets allocated. And, there are disputes. Government sits on the majority of spectrum. A lot of it's defense. And obviously, national security is a priority. We all want to make sure that those issues are addressed. But we become increasingly efficient in how spectrum is used. And I think there are ways in which we can satisfy not only the needs that we have for national security, but also the needs we have for economic security. And if you think about how important it is that we get more commercially available spectrum available out there, we just got to move forward in a way that enables us to achieve both objectives. And I think we can do that. We had the conversation with some stakeholders last night on this very subject, and it is but we need to get it done. We need to get it done sooner rather than later because we need the pipeline, and we need mid-band spectrum for Wi-Fi, for 5G, 6G, and the only way you get it is to get the pipeline loaded.
You've been involved in an effort to get it reauthorized, co-authoring a bill with Senator Ted Cruz that would extend that auction authority. Talk a little bit about that bill. Where does it stand? Is this really a 2025 play at this point? Well,
the one thing that it does, and I hope we can get it moving, there have been a couple times now when a spectrum bill's been pulled from the markup because the bill they were putting up wasn't supported by any Republicans. And we have our own version, and I think the difference between the two versions is the bill that we've introduced provides certainty, and it creates clear and definitive timelines for making more spectrum available. And anything the Biden administration is doing right now doesn't address that, and the Democrat bill doesn't either. So we need a requirement. The last time I was chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, we passed what's known as the Mobile Now bill, and that created a lot of mid-band spectrum, gave the FCC the authority to do it. Chairman Pai moved forward on that. And we had a huge auction. In fact, Verizon spent $52 billion on that auction alone. And we need that kind of authority again, and clear direction to do it. I mean, you can give them the authority, but you need to have clear guidelines and timelines in place. So that's the difference right now, and I hope we can bridge it because it is really critically important to our country to stay ahead. I mean, China continues to open up more and more of that mid-band spectrum. And if we aren't keeping up with them, we're going to lose the competition.
I want to talk about China in a little bit, but before that, so you said hopefully maybe before the
Well,
election?
We'll see. I mean, it's going to take some coming together, meeting of the minds, but there are some, it's always about incentives, and I think if there's an alignment of incentives, and I hope there is, that we could get this done. If we don't, obviously, if we get the majority, we'll be hot on the trail early next year. But we can't really, frankly, wait that long. We need to try and get this done sooner.
I want to talk about the issue of net neutrality. It recently flared up again. Last month, you said this on the Senate floor. Like the Obama FCC before it, the Biden FCC wants to assert broad new government powers over the internet using rules that were designed for telephone monopolies during the Great Depression. And if there were ever a solution in search of a problem, this is it. What's the solution?
Well, I mean, I think everything was fine. This is a solution in search of a problem. we were the investment in this country when the heavy regulatory regime, the net neutrality regime that was in place under President Obama was removed and repealed, investment picked up. Capital investment was flowing. And if you look at how we survived the pandemic relative to other countries around the world, I think it was a tribute to the fact that we didn't have the heavy hand of government weighing down on that innovation and that investment. And so frankly, I don't understand why we had to go back to something that wasn't working. And in my view, really stymies investment. And you can clearly look at that if you look at the way that it impacted what was going on in the economy. It's not a necessary thing, and it creates all kinds of uncertainty. It creates questions about whether or not there might at some point be rate regulation. I mean, this is a broad authority. When you start treating the internet as a Title II monopoly under a statute that goes back almost 100 years, that is not keeping pace with what's happening in the real world. And I just think that was a big mistake. This FCC went back to rules that just make no sense for where we are today, and frankly, I think are going to be an impediment to the kind of investment we want to see.
I want to talk small business and the impact 5G can have. We always have to have a South Dakota, North Dakota moment in our conversations on stage. But I want to hear about what you're hearing from your constituents. Obviously, South Dakota has a lot of rural areas. Can you talk about places like Sioux Falls or other places where 5G can have that impact or having an impact on the economy?
It is. I mean, we're doing some remarkable things in South Dakota, and there are so many applications. Telehealth is one. We've got big rural areas, as you know, in the Dakotas, and during the pandemic, we discovered that there are a lot of ways in which we can serve, meet healthcare needs for people living in remote rural areas. So telehealth's a big deal. Precision agriculture, we're becoming more efficient, more productive, increasing the bushels per acre, increasing our yields. And that makes us more competitive in the global economy there as well. Obviously, distance learning. There's so many applications to just the build out of these networks, and we've seen enormous investment in our state of South Dakota. And in fact, there were days when you and I could go to certain parts of our state and get off the grid, and they can find you just about anywhere now. But that's a great tribute again to just the innovation, the investment we have in our economy. And the applications are very real. And Sioux Falls was one of the first cities of its size to get 5G. There's a boom going on in South Dakota, and particularly in Sioux Falls. It's exploded, and people are moving there, businesses are moving there, creating good paying jobs. That's good for the economy. And so these investments, and these are infrastructure investments, have lots of ramifications, most of which are beneficial. And clearly, those are a few examples that affect our states.
I want to zoom out from the local level to kind of U.S. leadership writ large on 5G and future technologies. You kind of alluded to this, but I want to kind of drill down on that a little bit in the sense of why does it matter for the U.S. to lead here?
I think we don't. If we don't lead, we're going to fall. We're already in great power competition with China, and they're a state-owned economy, and so they are investing heavily in areas like artificial intelligence. They're investing heavily in 5G, 6G technologies, and if we don't keep up, we're going to lose our place. And I think that American leadership and the way we do things in this country, which is to encourage, get the incentives out there, and the private sector, the market is remarkable in the way that it works. And I think you've seen that in spades just in the last few years in this sector of our economy. But if we don't do this, then in every sector of our economy, we'll fall behind. And you look at what's happened in Europe, for example, and some of the heavy-handed regulation that they've used. I'm a big believer in light touch. And I think there are, as these new technologies emerge and roll out, you want to see the private capital flow, and it allocates those resources way better than the government could. And that's why I think we win with China. But we can't get behind when it comes to issues like just creating more commercially available spectrum. And, whether that's on the Wi-Fi side or wireless mobile, 5G, 6G, this is a race, and it's a race we want to stay ahead in. And I would say the same thing about AI. I'm a big believer that we need to in artificial intelligence as well.
We'll talk about that. So, I mean, obviously, China is an issue where Republicans and Democrats have come together. But are there other countries where you think that the U.S. could be losing the arms race when it comes to telecom, when it comes to the technology arms race of the future?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously right now, the big competitor out there that we see on the world stage, and clearly a country that views its role as being not only a peer with the U.S., but dominant, is China. But I think there are other countries out there that are, they're finding their way to make the types of investments, whether these are state-owned economies, whether this is, whether it's private investment. But I would argue that China, other areas of Asia that are exploding, they're going to see more and more investment in this space. And I think that it's going to become, and if you look at it from a national security standpoint, obviously it's China, it's Russia, it's North Korea, and it's Iran, the sort of axis of evil, and they're working together a lot. And I think this has national security implications, not only because of what it does in terms of the economic impacts, and we talk about foreign adversary technologies like TikTok in this country, and how that allows the Chinese to gather information and data on American citizens, but and also to use algorithms to manipulate the content that we see online. So these all have national security implications. Clearly, China is the main actor there, but I think we have to focus on the U.S. and doing everything we can to optimize our investment and growth and innovation and the creativity. This is a remarkable country built upon remarkable principles that have led to remarkable results. And I don't think we want to get away from that. I think that when you start looking at having government have a heavier hand, a bigger role, making more of those decisions, creating bureaucracies around it, it slows everything down, it stifles innovation. And as a consequence, I think it makes us less competitive globally, which I think we're poised to stay ahead of and to win, because I don't think China can keep up if we do the right things here. Part of which is creating, more mid-band spectrum, and our bill creates 2,500 megahertz of that.
We are quickly running out of time, but we always like to project forward in these conversations, thinking about 5, 10 years from now. What do you think Congress can do when it comes to helping foster this kind of innovation, and when it comes to kind of thinking it's not just 5G, it's 6G, it's what's going to be in the future for us as a country?
I think part of it is, I would argue, and is staying out of the way. There are applications, for example, in AI, and I've got a bill with Amy Klobuchar and about half a dozen other members of the Senate Commerce Committee that I think is sort of in my view at least, the right approach on artificial intelligence. It's a light touch, and we consulted a lot with the stakeholder community. We listened to the subject matter experts and came up with what I think is the correct approach to deal with a lot of these types of issues. But artificial intelligence has enormous upsides and potentials and benefits, but I also think there are some riskier applications, and that's why we have to have some general rules of the road and guardrails around it. And that's the way we're approaching the issue. Is the best way is to allow the market to innovate and capital to be allocated in an efficient way by the private economy, as opposed to having the government decide the winners and the losers. And I think that's the best approach to this. And I would argue that whether it's artificial intelligence or any emerging technology, that to me is the way that we want to proceed.
All right. Well, Senator Thune, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much to Senator Thune and his team for making that conversation possible. Now I'd love to welcome Hans Vestberg, CEO of Verizon. Sure. Yes, let's do it. You're here.
Yeah, I'm here.
As well as Tom Brady is going to be joining us as well.
We put him in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wherever you'd like. All right.
Hey, everybody.
Hi. Thanks so much for doing
Hi,
this.
how you doing? Hi, guys.
I'd like to think the cheering was for me, but I know that it wasn't. So
I think it was a little bit louder when you presented me. But I'm not sure.
Exactly.
My hearing is not perfect.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm going to start with you, Hans. We talked a lot about, kind of spectrum and policy, but you at Verizon had a recent Consumer Connections report.
Yeah.
I read through it, but at a high level, for those who haven't, what were some of the biggest trend lines that came out of it when it comes to kind of the mobile-first society and where we're going?
I think the biggest sort of fact was that the Buffalo Bills fans are using the network the most. And the Kansas City Chiefs fans are using it the least. I don't know what it tells about the game and how they played last season, but I leave that for experts to talk about that. I think in general, we have roughly 150 million wireless connections. We have the biggest consumer, direct-to-consumer business in the US. We started doing our consumer connection report early in the year in order to actually share data, how important the wireless networks are. We started with NFL because we're big on NFL, and of course we work with both NFL and many of the teams, and we have built all the stadiums. We have invested $1 billion in all the stadiums in order to get the connectivity in the stadiums, because the usage in the stadiums is enormous. Between the two seasons, this season and the previous season, the usage of the network increased 47%. So 47% is enormous. I cannot even explain to you how much more people or the fans are using the experience in the stadium. Everything from, of course, doing TikToks or whatever, which I shouldn't do according to Senator Thune, or Instagramming, FaceTiming, and all of that. It's just enormous. The new fan experience is that you're on the phone at the same time as you're looking at the game. That was one of the things we of course find out. And the other thing we found out is more than 50% of all the fans going to a stadium is a Verizon customer, which is like in here, 50%. So that has been for us important to understand what is the experience, what is the next experience you want in sports, because ultimately you still want to come to the stadium. We want the fans to come to the stadium, but now the expectation is your digital connection in the stadium. You can do things, you can communicate, you can order things. All that is what we found out in this survey. And of course, you can see which game was boring. You can see which game was the most used the networks. I think it was a Dolphins-Bills game that was way bigger than anybody else, and the reason was that it was a blowout. Apparently, Dolphins won easily. Week 4. So all that captured the use of the network. The other thing we learned was that you have 99% more usage of the wireless network before halftime compared to the second half. Wow. Not sure. They probably look a little bit more when they start heating up the shit. The first they will kick off, they do a lot of other stuff. So that's what we learned from this consumer connection report. But this was just the first sort of study we're doing. We're going to go to other areas, and we're going to actually have this report coming twice a year in order to share the importance of wireless network for today's society. I usually say that the 21st century's infrastructure is mobility, broadband, and cloud. It shouldn't matter where you're born, where you live, or where you are. You should have that digital connection, because in today's world, that makes you equal to anybody else. And that's sort of how Verizon thinks, and how I think. I mean, my life is, I'm Swedish, as you hear, I speak Swedish. So for me, equality and fairness is something important, and digital inclusion is definitely fairness and equality. So, but this was just a piece of the report, which you can dig into it. It's on your seats, probably. It's an amazing report.
Yes, and for those streaming online, I think it's also online. You can find it at Verizon.
Yeah.
Before we get to you, Tom, because I want to talk about this investment. It was obviously fan-focused, but was also about coaches being able to talk to players as well. Talk about the investment that Verizon made, and then I want to talk to you about how it impacted you as a quarterback.
No, so we realized that, first of all, security, low latency of the operations for NFL and for the teams is important. So in every of the 30 NFL stadiums, we have, together with NFL, built a private 5G network. And the private 5G network is actually doing the coach-to-coach communication, coach to quarterback. And also now we're connecting all the pads over that. So everything is connected to a private 5G network, because you cannot have interference on that. Yeah. When you have communication, or the operation want to do a review of a play or something, say, oh, that didn't really work, and you use the. So we have private networks for all the NFL stadiums. I mean, actually, when we go abroad, we bring that with us. Wow. So the opening game this year is in Brazil, Sao Paulo, in the Corinthians Stadium. We're going to bring the team there, and they have, because we need the same experience for the coaches, for the players, for the operation in every place they are, in order to have consistency and security. And we actually now also have sold that solution to NHL. So NHL is doing the same. They have private networks in all the stadiums for the operations. So here you see usage of managed spectrum in special kind of solutions. And Tom and I talked about this before. This is just the start of the private 5G network in the stadiums.
All right, Tom, you've heard kind of the impact and the investment that Verizon has obviously made. Sure. Talk about what that was like as a player in terms of being able to communicate. Obviously, you had a large crowd cheering here, but it would be much louder in a big
Sure.
stadium.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Obviously, I love being with Hans. Anytime I have the opportunity to hang with him, we enjoy it. We scrapped it around on the golf course pretty good last week.
Yeah.
But obviously, nice being here with you guys today, and certainly you, Anna, as well. Obviously, over a long period of time, and I did play for a long time, when I started, there was nothing like what it ended up being toward the end of my career. And the connectivity, the ability for us to communicate in real time changed so much of the preparation the entire week, but then also on game day. So there were so many elements to it that, again, I think the challenging thing is once you become established with it and you get really used to having such enabled connectivity, you don't ever go backwards.
Right.
The ability to share information between all of us throughout the week, everyone on the team, was so important. So much of what I did in my preparation was study film. Yeah. And it was the ability to get things from the football facility to my house. I'd be watching on film. This is actually a pretty cool story. When I was down in Tampa, we played in the Super Bowl in February of 2021. It was the COVID season. And it was the morning of the game, the morning of the Super Bowl. And I'm in my room. All the skill players, the tight ends, the wide receivers, and the running backs were spread throughout the hotel. And I'm watching film in preparation for the game that night. And we'd already done a lot of preparation at that point, but I wanted to make sure all the bases were covered. And here I am, I have my phone, I'm videoing plays from what I'm watching, sending them on a group text to all my teammates, saying, hey, if we get this look, I'm going to make this check. This check's going to get us into a better play. This play is going to be more successful. And I'm audio voice noting it over the video, sending it immediately to all my teammates. And those things all came up in the game. And I'm just thinking there wasn't a meeting that needed to be held. It was just me in my room videoing something, and instantaneously the connectivity to all the teammates. So again, the dissemination of all the information that we're getting, how do we share that in the most reliable, trustworthy way? And not only was it my own preparation, but that of my teammates and the coaches that allowed this preparation for athletes to improve so much. And that's obviously a tiny area of the world. But it's amazing what it's done for the ability for us to acquire more skills in this digital world. If you wanted to be a young athlete, if you wanted to be a young player, now you go online. You have all the tutorials available for everybody. Whether you want to be a better golfer and hit better golf shots or shoot a jump shot or throw a football, everybody has the ability now to go online and learn these skills that before it was just your high school coach teaching you, one of your parents teaching you, one of your neighbors teaching you. Now you can literally have it, even pro athletes are going online and looking for new drills. I'm with my daughter doing volleyball. She wants to be I don't know anything about volleyball, but you know what does? Instagram and TikTok. Okay, Instagram.
We don't do TikTok.
That's right. So you go on and you learn all these new drills, and it's been amazing because I actually sound like I have a decent idea of what I'm talking about when I'm with her.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I know.
Yeah, great.
All right, Hans, you heard Senator Thune talk a bit about Spectrum Authority and reauthorization, how it's been delayed. You run a global company, obviously doing a lot in the U.S., but also abroad. Can you talk about just at a high level why 5G, Spectrum Authority are vital for continuing to increase capacity, and also what you're doing with the NFL?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very important conversation. I mean, the last 5 years, Verizon has invested in spectrum and infrastructure on the top of that of $157 billion. It's a reason we do that, because there have been spectrum. The regulation is way different in Europe. I ran another company before, which actually oversee all countries in the world. It's astonishing to see that Europe has 1 billion people, US 330 million. If you combine the carriers in the US, spend $70 to $80 billion a year in infrastructure, Europe is doing 35 billion. So how can it be? It's the regulation we have, the ownership of spectrum. I own the spectrum as a fiduciary responsibility for me. If I own the spectrum, I can allocate money on top of it. Europe, they are licensing out the spectrum. So I have certainty of ownership on the spectrum that we have bought here, so I can put money on it because I can return it to my shareholders, because ultimately I have that responsibility as well. So having spectrum and the growth of the last 5 years in the overall wireless network of Verizon has grown 129%. It's just, people are using gigs or several gigs a month on the phone, and it's given that you should be streaming wherever you're walking. But for me, it's also a societal responsibility for the United States of America to see that we can have digital healthcare, as the Senator talked about, digital education. You should be able to do remote work. All that comes down that you have spectrum and can do it in order to be competitive. And I 100% agree with the Senator that if we want to continue to be the #1 in the world, we need to have the best digital infrastructure in the world. But we also need to have the most important control over national security. But they can live together, because ultimately there are spectrum that can be used differently and better. And there we have a 100% sharing. And I think the important is that to have a pipeline constantly of spectrum is important, because the 157 billion is actually an investment straight into the GDP in the US. Straight into the GDP of the growth. And that's only me. My competitors, they also invest, not equally much as us. But if you combine how much we're doing,
right,
it's an enormous driver for growth in this country. And if there's no spectrum, I have no certainty of investment, I have nothing to deploy on.
Right.
So it's very simple math for a guy running a company like Verizon, what I need to do. And that's why it's so important to get clear FCC so they can have authority of spectrum. And number two, then you need to have some spectrum as well. I mean, authority is not enough. You need to have a clearance of spectrum, and then it takes some time to clear it up. So every day that goes, you basically push out 3 to 5 years to the next auction. That's enormous in a country that wants to compete with China, want to be #1 on digital infrastructure, and we don't have any visibility on the funnel. So I share the concern. I probably have even stronger words than the Senator, because ultimately it's a right of the US citizen to have the most advanced digital technology in this country. And just think about AI. I will not go on right now, because then I'm going to go crazy. But just think about AI needs to be at the edge of the network in order not to use that much power that we now are talking about. 3 times more power consumption in the United States because of data centers that are going to do generative AI. You can use the edge of the mobile network in order to do a lot of that processing locally in order not to send the data center. You reduce the cost, better latency, and better security on AI. So that's going to happen next 5 years. And so my feeling is that this is top urgency, not only for me being interested in running Verizon. It's for the US citizen, it's for the competition, it's for the GDP growth in the country. If you don't have spectrum, it's going to be a problem.
Well, and for consumers, right? Because as you say, no one's looking for us to go back in time to, wait for a dial-up to be able to get something on the internet.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Exactly.
9.6.
Tom, you have transitioned from quarterback to the NFL broadcasting booth. How are you? You talked about kind of how you're using technology when it comes to your daughter and volleyball.
Yeah.
How is that kind of enhancing what you're doing, in the broadcast booth?
Well, it's very exciting. I think for me, it's just a different opportunity to kind of play in a different arena, and to have this broadcasting job with Fox. There's 30 million people a week that are going to be watching that broadcast. And what do they want to see? They want to see a great production. They want to see a great product on the field. And I'm very fortunate that I get to be a part of it. But I think what I've realized stepping back from actually being on the field, where you're so focused on doing the individual job as a player, is the kind of production that it takes to actually get that feed to 30 million people across the United States and the world.
Yeah.
So it's just a tremendous production.
Yeah.
I mean, there's trucks, and I actually had a rehearsal game for internal use only, but it was for.
It was not broadcast.
It wasn't broadcast, but we pretended like it was actually a real game. And it's just amazing the connectivity we needed between myself, my partner, the people in the truck, the other people in the booth. There's just so many people needed and necessary to get this amazing game that I was able to play, and now be able to be part of the production that broadcasts that to so many people. So I'm fascinated by it all. I love talking to Hans and learning about what he's doing and all the technologies that he's continuing to promote, because that's just the way the world is going. That's where it's headed. We can do so much good with it. Our ability to communicate to people is greater than it's ever been. We have people that have opportunities to learn things they've never learned before. These are all huge positives. So again, for this opportunity that I have in broadcasting, I'm looking forward to it because I love having this microphone that allows me to talk about the greatness of the athletes, the greatness of the players, the greatness of our communities. What does sports do? It brings so many people together. And to be a part of that going forward with the NFL, which I've loved and been a part of, it's very, very exciting for me.
We are quickly running out of time, and Hans, I'm going to give you the last word.
Sure about that?
We'll see. Maybe I won't,
Okay,
you know?
let's go.
All right. The report had 8.4 million fans using Verizon network during games, 6.8 million calls during games were happening, 1.66 terabytes.
Yeah.
Of
It's
data
hard to explain.
usage?
It's a lot.
So it's a lot. Yeah, I don't know what a terabyte is, but I assume it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Talk to us, I asked the center at the end, project forward. What is the one message you want to leave our audience here? There's a lot of staffers, there's people that are advocates in Washington when it comes to 5G and spectrum.
No, I think for us as citizens, as people of the United States, live, play, and work. We need to be connected all the time. Sometimes, maybe not all the time, but in order to live, to be connected to friends, families, sports experiences, you need to be connected. You need to work. You need to be connected for it. We heard about Tom. He needs to connect with a lot of his players and whatever work you have. Yep. And you want to play and have fun. All that, for me, you need to be connected. And the growth of the networks, I don't have the 100% of stats, but I think that in general, the US consumers using the network more than double as much as a European consumer. Because that's how important the digital infrastructure is in the US compared to the Europeans. And I think this is a competitive advantage for us, how we live, how we work, and how we play. And that's why if we don't have a pipe to continue to develop that, and we didn't come to 6G because then I've been so excited, so probably we will stay here for the rest of the night. But it's going to come new technologies where US need to lead in order to continue to attract investments, R&D, and then leading how we have all the constituents and using the next generation's technology. And then you add in AI on that. This is critical. 21st century's infrastructure as a base is mobility, broadband, and cloud. And then you put all the AI and all on that. That's how you compete. That's how your nation you compete so you can grow. And giving all the citizens an equal chance. So for me, it's so obvious this, but I understand also the complications in the Senate and all of that. But ultimately, spectrum will make a difference for this country in many senses.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Tom, Hans, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for joining us as well, and to Verizon for making this conversation possible. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.